Welcome to the show, everybody. Mark Farzetta with you here for the Farzy Show. Lovely to have you along for the ride. Good God. Now Fletcher Cox is out. Brandon Graham stays. I'm happy about that. Not happy that the Eagles are going to be down two of their biggest leaders to still stay in Lane Johnson and Brandon Graham. And I know a lot of people might throw leadership out the window after the way the season ended last year. I'm not throwing it out. I think it's very important. But Fletcher Cox calls it a career. He announces that on social media. We'll see if we get a press conference from Fletcher Cox. Just, I don't know what he would have it about at this point, but just found it interesting that after 12 years, I will say a borderline Hall of Fame career, certainly a Ring of Honor, Eagles Hall of Fame career, that he just said, all right, I'm good. And here's the post on social media, and I'm out. Hey, that's what he wants to do. I have no argument with it. Certainly seemed like it, and I know we've had guests on the show allude to it when Jordan Davis addressed the media at the end of the season at his locker on clean-out day, basically talking as if not only Fletcher Cox, but also Jason Kelce were retiring and how he wanted to send those guys out on the right note. And unfortunately, with the way the season ended in Tampa, they were unable to do that. And we'll get to that quote coming up in a minute. But it certainly seemed like the players knew what was what when it came to those two players retiring. And now the torch has been passed, especially on the defensive line, to Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. We know Jordan Davis towards the end of the season really started to go the way of the dodo, kind of invisible, unfortunately. And Jalen Carter, the rookie wall, certainly came a little faster than most of us would have anticipated or liked, for that matter. But the team reacts to Fletcher Cox on social media. Fletcher Cox, of course, puts that post up there with thanking Doug Peterson, thanking Nick Sirianni, Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, Andy Reid. Chip Kelly left off the list. Not a shocker, but left off the list. So we'll get the reaction, of course, from Fletcher Cox. Also, Diana Rossini of ESPN put out this tweet, and then everything went bonkers. We'll get to this as the show goes on as well. But Eagles have been shopping both Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick for the last few weeks. Look for Philadelphia to aggressively pursue Bryce Huff in free agency. Currently of the New York Jets, about to be a free agent. Tamper, and we'll see how that plays out. But we'll examine what's the right decision to make there for the Eagles, what you think as Eagles fans. If you want to see the Eagles move on from Hassan Reddick, from Josh Sweat, and bring in Bryce Huff. We'll get into that conversation. Sixers get a big win last night over the New York Knicks, which was great to see in the Garden. Got a little chippy there with about 4 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and the 76ers were up there on the Knicks. Kelly Oubre, Dante DiVincenzo, mixing it up, scrapping just a little bit. We'll get into that conversation. Either way, great win for the Sixers. They needed that type of win. They need to get as many W's as possible when they don't have Tyrese Maxey, as we know, and they don't have Joel Embiid. We'll get into that conversation. John Tortorella lost his damn mind over the weekend. Oh, my goodness gracious, so much to get into. So great to have you guys with me here. Here's what I'll think about when I think about the career of Fletcher Cox. Number one, selfishly, it's like the first player that I ever really wanted the Eagles to get in the first round. They actually got him. Like I was so amped up. I was like, oh my God, Fletcher Cox is still there on the board. So kick Fletcher Cox. And they got Fletcher Cox. As I said, he goes on to have an absolute, not even a question, Eagles Hall of Fame career. Very much, I feel, a borderline Canton, Ohio Hall of Fame career for the Philadelphia Eagles. Defensive tackles in the Philadelphia Eagles, nobody had more sacks. Nobody had more Pro Bowl appearances than Fletcher Cox. When I look back on his career as the player, I think about a guy that was constantly double-teamed. I think about a guy that, even though for his ability and for the way he was praised throughout local and national media, I feel like he was a guy that didn't matter how many times he showed up on the stat sheet, people always expected him to show up on the stat sheet more. And although he might not have had a game where he had 3 sacks and was dominant like that more often than people would have liked, he was always doing the things that you had to go back and look at the film and go, damn, look at Fletcher Cox right there taking that double team so that Brandon Graham on the outside could get to the quarterback, or Chris Long on the outside could get to the quarterback. But, you had a guy like Fletcher Cox in the middle of that defensive line that was taking on double teams left and right. And I will obviously miss that kind of push that you had up the middle from him. I think about one play in particular with Fletcher Cox. And it was 2017. You didn't know it at the time, but the Eagles were going to go on to win the Super Bowl. And they're playing in Washington against the then Redskins. And Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham get into the backfield. Brandon Graham causes a strip sack of Kirk Cousins in the first game of the season. Close game. I think it was 22 to 17 at the time. Fletcher Cox comes in as well with the ball on the ground, scoops it up after Brandon Graham forced the fumble, and Fletcher Cox scoops it up, takes it in for the touchdown. And then the rest of that season was history. We know how it ended in Minnesota with a Super Bowl championship. Well, we know how it really ended. On the steps of the Art Museum, baby. I think about that play because there are a number of plays like that where you needed someone to step up and somebody to make a play. And when you look back in the last 12 years with the Philadelphia Eagles, if Fletcher Cox was there, defensively speaking, he was in on a lot of those plays. Whether it was drawing a double team, whether it was forcing the sack, whether it was getting the sack, rather, it was making a play. Fletcher Cox could make that play. And that's the play that I look back on with Fletcher Cox in his career, where it's just like he was just there to make the play. And he was there to always make sure that the offense was scheming against him. I loved the Eagles when they put out the tribute video. There's like a 3-minute, 30-second tribute video they put out. One is about a 9-minute video of him just trash talking the other team. But one of the videos has him a couple of different times just taunting the opposing sideline, the coach, just be like, that guy's going to need some help. You got to double team me. Don't you watch film? You got to double team me. And unfortunately for those teams, they didn't figure that out, but you got to do it. But I look back on a guy that certainly went through contract turmoil while he was here, always ended up, obviously 12 years here in Philadelphia, always ended up on the right side of things with him staying in Philly, even last year, staying in Philadelphia for that one more year. But definitely went through that as a career. I felt was always worth it. I always argued on the player's side when it comes to trying to get your money, especially people arguing about OTAs, whether I was going to miss OTAs, whatever. I remember during that little dispute, trying to interview Fletcher Cox in the locker room and be like, how much you paying? I'm like, it's just an interview, man. It's just like, all right, never mind. I don't want to do it. I'm like, okay, all right, that's fine. It's his right. It's fine. No big deal. 2 weeks after that, he was answering my questions about posing next to Chris Long in their jerseys. Chris Long and Fletcher Cox, and having a good laugh over it. 5 minutes of that online somewhere. You can watch it. But he was that type of guy. Always wanted to have fun. Brandon Graham, his locker was right next to him. Brandon Graham would be doing interviews, and Fletcher Cox would just be putting things in the background of the interview with Brandon Graham. And this is during the media session. This isn't during this isn't a one-on-one. And Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham always just having fun with one another the entire time. During the press junkets, if you will, during those media sessions, those guys would just be messing with each other constantly. And it was like that type of attitude in 2017, even before the play I described with him with the scoop and score against Washington that year. Chris Long being in that locker room, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham having the relationship that they already had well established, Malcolm Jenkins being there. For as high hopes as we had for Carson Wentz, I remember being in that locker room in 2017, and I remember just feeling like something. Look, I'm not telling you I knew the Eagles were going to win the Super Bowl, but I remember having been in a lot of different Eagles locker rooms with different leadership. There was something special about that defense in 2017. Whether it was the relationship between Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox, whether it was Chris Long coming in with the more veteran leadership, having won a Super Bowl in New England the previous year, with Malcolm Jenkins just being Malcolm Jenkins, there was just something different about that defense that it made me feel like this team was going to do something, even more so than Carson Wentz going into his second year and what he could do and all that stuff. There was something special about that team in general, but that defense is really what made the whole vibe of the team. And I found it so amazing that when Jason Kelce was doing his retirement speech, one of the people he shouted out was Malcolm Jenkins on the defensive side of things. We all we got, we all we need. And we all know that was kind of the mantra of that team. And then the underdogs thing certainly came out after that, but physically being underdogs. But it started with Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham and then the additions that they made to this defense. And there was just something special about that defense when these guys could really do something this year. In my mind, having never seen the Eagles win a Super Bowl, it's like, maybe another NFC Championship game. We'll see what happens after that. And then, we all know what happened. But a lot of it started with Fletcher Cox, his leadership, his ability, certainly. And now that torch is being passed to Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. And Milton Williams. Let's not forget about Milton Williams. Certainly has been a Johnny-on-the-spot type of guy in his career as well, but his brief career to this point. But I'm gonna miss that attitude. I'm gonna miss that swagger with Fletcher Cox, and I'm gonna miss that talent. And I hope that the Eagles locker room offensively can overcome losing a guy like Jason Kelce, and now on the defensive side of things, missing a guy like Fletcher Cox. I can't remember a time like this. I was really trying to think about, wow, two not only extremely talented players, but two huge pieces of the locker room gone within a week. And I was trying to think about like a run that any Philly team had in my lifetime. And of course, I went right to 2008 and the Phillies. I was like, wow, what if Jimmy Rollins and Chase Elliott just retired, after that? Now, granted, they were a little younger at the time, but it was a couple years after those guys, they were traded, they were gone, but it was like, what if they just called it a career after that? The last game Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce played was that game against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Ugh. That sucks. And one of the things I did pick up from the Fletcher Cox tribute video from the Eagles, which was amazing, was it looked like in Tampa, because I've been in that locker room in Tampa, Fletcher Cox said, "This is it for me." And that hadn't come out. That wasn't said. That wasn't reported. This is the only thing that we really had. This is Jordan Davis on clean out day at the NovaCare complex. The man predicted the future before we really knew what was going down.
Fletch, man, and Kelce and all those guys, man. Like, I'm ashamed that we couldn't send them out the right way, but I'm grateful for the moments that we had. And I got to at least say, when it's all said and done in my career, yeah, I played with Fletch for 2 years. Yeah, I played with Jason Kelce for 2 years. Yeah, I played for BG. I think he's coming back for his homegoing. And you're just like, man, like, I played with those guys. Just had that experience and all those stories I could tell. Even though it's for a short 2 years, a lot of guys can tell for more, but I'm very grateful for those moments.
That was before the retirement. The story of Jason Kelce retiring had already been broken by Adam Schefter. Kelce wanted a little bit more time to think about it, kicked some options around, and finally officially came to a conclusion that it was time to retire. Fletcher Cox legit told the team on camera, "I'm retiring. This is it. This is the end for me." Lane Johnson, I love you. Jason Kelce, I love you. Nick, Jeffrey Lurie, all these guys, I love it. Hugs Jeffrey Lurie, and that didn't leak out to the media. It was expected, but it didn't leak out. I assume Jason Kelce gave a similar speech. Credit to those players for keeping a lid on it, kind of, because Jordan Davis telling you what was going to go down, rather interesting. But now it's a lot to change over to, especially when you come into the world of leadership. And one of the things that I really like about Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter was last year going into OTAs and going into training camp, you heard guys like Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce talk about Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and how serious they were taking their work, how much attention they were paying to their craft, and all the coaching they were taking in and listening to veterans and not getting a big head, not taking anything for granted, doing everything they were supposed to be doing, checking every single box. You could say coaches are there to do their job, and they certainly are. And Vic Fangio and his staff are going to be in there, and they're going to do a job and all that stuff. But when you have that kind of veteran presence looking over your shoulder constantly, like Fletcher Cox, Kelce on the offensive side, I mean, there's still a guy right there in Lane Johnson that's playing at a Pro Bowl and all-pro level. It's going to be hard for Cam Jurgens and Tyler Steen to slack off with Lane Johnson standing right there. But on the defensive side of things, Fletcher Cox was the anchor. absolutely the anchor to this team, the anchor to that defensive line. We know the talent level. We've seen the talent level of Jalen Carter, especially, and the career we can expect from him. But he's got to be able to cash in those chips. Like, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you're not willing to work to make it even better, then that's going to be a problem. And I'm not saying that Jalen Carter slacked off at the end of the year. I'm not saying he mailed it in. I'm not saying he got out wildly out of shape or Jordan Davis or anything like that. It's a tough sport to play. It's a tough sport to go from playing with boys to playing with men. And that's what both these guys do. And Jalen Carter more so. And yes, they played a lot of football and all that stuff. I'm not ruling them out. I'm not saying this is the end of them by any means, but it certainly helps to have Big Brother right over your shoulder saying, no, this is where you got to keep pushing. This is where you think you're done. You're not done yet. You keep pushing. You get to that other side of fatigue. And that's where you find out how strong you really are. And that's the stuff veteran leadership can do. So now who's going to do that for this team? Well, Hassan Reddick might not be here, according to the report. Josh Sweat, probably not going to be here. Brandon Graham, very happy that he's here. But Brandon Graham is far from the Pro Bowler that he was 2 years ago. Brandon Graham comes to attitude, comes to leadership, comes to keeping things light. When it comes to having a serious conversation, he can absolutely do that. But I think especially when you're talking about interior defensive linemen versus outside defensive linemen, edge rushers, if you will, it's a little bit different. Defensive ends, it's a little bit different. And Brandon Graham is not, as much as we love him, he's incredible. He'll be a Ring of Honor guy as well. He'll be an Eagles Hall of Famer as well, as we know. But it's not the same career, doesn't carry the same message as a guy like Fletcher Cox. I am happy that they retain two leaders, one for each side of the ball. But when it comes to that major influence, Fletcher Cox has got it. Fletcher Cox is the guy that would check Brandon Graham. When Brandon Graham was running his mouth continuously, nonstop, throughout every game they ever played together, Fletcher Cox was the one to go, back it up. All right, let's cut it real quick. And then you'd hear Brandon Graham go, okay, that's probably a good idea. I should probably back off right here. Will be missed, Fletcher Cox. Very excited that Brandon Graham. I haven't seen the details, and I've been looking for the details as far as the money goes for Brandon Graham. I would assume it's close to the league minimum for a veteran. Would assume. But wow. Leadership takes a hit. And above all else, away from anything you might label as a high school Harry type thing, away from all that, damn, still playing at a very high level. Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce. I do wonder, and I've said this all throughout, so this isn't new. I wonder if one of the reasons Fletcher Cox didn't do a press conference, and I haven't seen anything scheduled about if he's going to do it or whatever. I wonder if he only released a statement if it's because he could play elsewhere. I wouldn't be shocked if Fletcher Cox, and this is what I've said all along, I wouldn't be shocked if Fletcher Cox wasn't retiring. If towards the end of the year, somebody needs a defensive tackle, he stays in shape, maybe he goes ring shopping, maybe with the Eagles. Oh yeah, I could give you a couple downs. Yeah, sure. I can give you 30 snaps, I can give you 20 snaps. Wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked. And sometimes when people release a statement, it's easier to just release the statement as opposed to doing a press conference. Like if Jason Kelce ended up coming back playing for the Eagles, it'd be weird because of everything that was just said. You know what I mean? But the fact that we don't have the audio or the video of Fletcher Cox like breaking down during a press conference, it's a little easier to just release the statement and then maybe I got a little left in me. I wouldn't be surprised if, say, come November, we start hearing stories of either the Eagles or another team in the NFL. Oh, they're kicking the tires. See if Fletcher Cox is really enjoying the hunting that he's in. You want to take a break from that? Come back to the NFL for a minute? Want a couple more game checks? Hey, man, I've talked to plenty of former athletes that once they go into their job in the media, they're like, damn, I miss those game checks. Anytime you get a couple more game checks, okay. All the money in the world. You could have all the money in the world. but then you stop making all the money in the world. You're like, I got to use that game check again. I'm not saying it's imminent. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if that's the direction that he goes. But calling it a career, Brandon Graham now with his, what did he call it? His farewell tour getting underway this season. And the Eagles potentially moving on the defensive line from Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick on the edge to go after Bryce Huff of the New York Jets. So once again, Diana Rossini put it out there. It's now been echoed through other reports. Hassan Reddick, Diana Rossini misspelled his name, so maybe it's a different guy. I don't know. But Hassan Reddick, as far as this goes, Josh Sweat could be on the way out. Bryce Huff could be on his way in. Bryce Huff, about to turn 26 years old in a couple days, as a matter of fact. Josh Sweat about to turn 28. Hassan Reddick on the wrong side of 30. What we're looking at right now is the Eagles are going to get a little bit younger and also on the upswing. Josh Sweat, for good as the season as he started out to have, didn't have a sack for the last 7 games of the season. Had a sack in the playoffs against Tampa Bay. Not a strong finish. Not a strong finish for Hassan Reddick either. Not a strong start, but he could easily chalk that up to the thumb injury that he had. Got the cast off his hand. Then he was able to get after it for a couple of games, and then he fell by the wayside. Look at a guy like Bryce Huff, 10 sacks last year for the New York Jets. They want to see what he can obviously do with Vic Fangio in this defensive line, with the interior defensive linemen that they have here in Philly, hoping that they take their next step forward, not just as players, but also as leaders in Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. I do not want to see the Eagles move on from both Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick. If I have to choose between the two, I still want to keep Hassan Reddick here in Philadelphia. He's had success in 3 different schemes. People are acting like this is his first introduction to Vic Fangio's defense when he's been in Vic Fangio's defense since he's been here in Philadelphia. Will it be different because it's a different person, because it's actually Vic Fangio? Absolutely. But on the rare occasion that you're going to have somebody attempting to get into the backfield off the snap, I want that guy to be Hassan Reddick. If you're not going to be dialing up blitzes and being aggressive, as we know the Vic Fangio defense doesn't do, but if you're going to do it occasionally, I want one of those guys to be Hassan Reddick. I don't think he's going to get mega huge money elsewhere. Look, I know when it comes to the cap, Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox don't do you huge favors in money that comes off the books. But in terms of money that could have been allotted to those 2 players, you're talking about $25 million? About $25 million for those 2 players that play 1 more year. If they sign deals similar to what they signed or what they had going for them last year, that's a lot of money that could have been allocated to them that is not. So although you don't physically see that money come off the books, it's not being added to it. So I know people are talking about the salary cap implications of it, but it's hard to really know what they were going to be making. If they go to $14 million, or like Fletcher Cox was going to be making or made last year, I don't know if he's going to be signing that again this year. But you're talking about probably between 20 and 25 million that you're not having to pay your center and your defensive tackle, one of your defensive tackles. That's money that's not on the books now. That's money you're still saving either way. So I think that they're going to renegotiate with Hassan Reddick. I think Hassan Reddick stays here. I think Josh Sweat moves on. If the Eagles are going to be really aggressive, according to Diana Rossini, really aggressive aggressive on the Bryce Huff front, I think Howie's going to get his guy. If that's really the direction they want to go, then I think Howie is going to get his guy. Also, you look at a guy in Bryce Huff, plays with his hand in the dirt a little bit more often, certainly gets into the backfield with great regularity. He could be a guy that the Eagles would certainly look to have flourish in the Kelly Green, Midnight Green in South Philadelphia. But it's going to be a very busy week when you talk about the start of free agency. Draft things, of course, are going to be heating up post-combine. Teams filling holes with guys that through free agency, leaving holes open when it comes to filling those spots, potentially with first-round draft picks. Eagles get awarded compensatory picks over the weekend, get another third-round pick and more fifth-round picks as well, and that's not nothing. That is definitely something there. So I look forward to seeing how that fruit is bore from your Philadelphia Eagles. if I have my choice between the two, and you tell me who you want, if you want Josh Sweat to stay, if you want Hassan Reddick to stay, if you had to choose between the two of them to stay in Philadelphia, who would you want? My vote's for Hassan Reddick. Success in multiple schemes. I'd like to see him have that success under the Fangio scheme here in Philadelphia yet again. What did I have next? Ladies and gentlemen, 76ers are having some trouble, to put it plainly. But last night, I don't know if Nick Nurse ran on the riot act. I don't know what happened. But after their loss to the Pelicans, a game where I'm watching it, Sixers are down 30, and every once in a while, the way our house is set up, I watch TV looking one direction in the room adjoining our living room, the den, if you will, and my wife is watching TV looking the other direction. Like we basically we're facing the same way, or we're facing each other, sort of. That's a horrible way to explain. I don't know what to say. Sofa's facing one way in the other room, facing the other way in the other. Anyway, we can have a conversation and make eye contact, basically. How's the Sixers game? How the Sixers doing? And I'm like, pretty terrible. They're down 30. Check that. 32. Just in that moment. Down 32 points. And she's like, do you even have to watch? I'm like, at this point, I'm in. Now, they made a run at the end of the game. But the words that came to mind were lethargic. Lazy. Definitely lazy at times. Untalented. Buddy Hield struggling. Tobias Harris struggling. Kelly Oubre trying to be the team leader. I just watched that game and I went, like, when you're down 30, it's almost like it becomes that car accident that I've talked about before, where it's just like I can't look away from how horrible it is. So that's what happened against the Pelicans. And then I don't know what fire was lit under them. They came out swinging, at least in the fourth quarter of that game, but by then it was like garbage time, so forget about it. And then in this Knicks game, they controlled the game. I couldn't believe it. I'm watching last night, and you got Lowry back in the lineup. Maxey's sitting on the bench. You have Kelly Oubre fighting, almost literally, with Dante DiVincenzo at the end of the game. And Campaign was hitting some threes for you. And I'm looking at this, and I'm like, they're also getting to the glass. They're also getting rebounds. They're actually showing some fight in this game. And I sure as hell did not expect to see that from this. I thought they were just cooked. I thought that Pelicans game was just going to sink them until they got Maxey and they get Joel Embiid back. But they went out there last night against the New York Knicks, man, and they fought. At MSG, on the road, away from South Philadelphia. And you're seeing guys get on the ground. Again, seeing guys get a little scrappy. Seeing guys get boards. Seeing guys knock down their threes. I saw some efficient passing, and I haven't seen good ball movement with that, especially without Tyrese Maxey in quite some time. So that was good to see. And they snapped a three-game losing streak. It's a three-game losing streak that felt like an eternity, by the way, especially with the way they played against the Pelicans. So they got the win last night. That's great. It's good to see. The hockey world, ladies and gentlemen. Flyers down 4-0 in the first period. I have no doubt in my mind that this was this was like back in the day with Major League Baseball when the managers were like allowed to argue. And I remember many stories about Larry Boa just turning to his bench coach and just being like, I'm going to get tossed. Gary Varsho, I'm going to get tossed right here. These guys need something. These guys need to wake me up. And he'd go out and argue with the ump and get tossed. John Tortorella pulled a Earl Weaver, Larry Boa, Lou Piniella, pulled all that last night to try to get Saturday to try to get the Flyers up for this game against Lightning. They went on to lose 7-0, so it really didn't work. John Tortorella has been suspended for 2 games and fined $50,000. It didn't work on any front. Your coach just took a $15,000 hit. What a weekend. What a weekend. Well, they beat the Florida Panthers again in that 2-1 game, and then they pooped the bed against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Not a great weekend there for the Philadelphia Flyers. Not a great weekend, to say the absolute least. It was a pretty action-packed weekend, though. I will say that. I have to mention this. In case you didn't do your morning scroll on your phone just yet, all right? Russell Wilson is now a Pittsburgh Steeler. Signed a 1-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know what's really amazing about that? He's going to make $38 million this year. Excuse me. He's going to make $38 million he's going to make $38 million playing for the Steelers this year, but being paid by the Broncos. The Broncos are paying him $38 million to not play for them. Excuse me. He's getting $1.2 million on top of that from the Steelers. He'll make $39.2 million this year. 38 of that's paid by the Broncos. 1.2 is paid by the Steelers. That is a deal. That is a deal, ladies and gentlemen. That might be the best deal ever in football. So Russell Wilson, a guy who I am out on, for the record. I have no confidence in Russell Wilson. He's cashing the check. People always say this. I remember during the season, our friend Seth Joyner was talking about Shaq Leonard back when it was just a rumor that the Eagles could sign Shaq Leonard or bring in Shaq Leonard, or should they bring in Shaq Leonard? Teams don't let good players go. You're right. They also don't pay them $38 million to not play for them. Russell Wilson, I enjoyed the hell out of his career. Incredible career. Okay. Should have won 2 Super Bowls. Not just one, but 2. If Pete Carroll handed the ball to Marshawn Lynch. But he didn't. Instead, Tom Brady won another one. As the commercial says, Tom, you've won enough. You've won enough, Tom Brady. Russell Wilson should have 2. He doesn't. He has 1. But now he is out of Denver after a horrifically failed project. And now he's going to play for Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kenny Pickett, thanks very much for your service for this last 2 years. You're gone. Not gone, but he's now riding the pine. And Mason Rudolph is no longer going to be with the Steelers, most likely. So there you go. Russell Wilson will be playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers next year, being paid handsomely by the Denver Broncos. Business is fun. The business of sports, a lot of fun. One last thing to mention. Edmundo Sosa hit a grand slam for the Phillies over the weekend, so that was fun. That was also fun. Hey, also, preview of the week. It's going to be 72 on Thursday. So all you golfers in the area, I'm sure you'll be out hitting the greens, and I hope I'm one of them. I hope I'm with you. Let me tell you about the great people at the Game Time app, ladies and gentlemen. Want to go to the game? Want to go to the concert? Want to go to the big event? Want to go to the comedy show? Check out the incredible Game Time app. Download the Game Time app to your phone. Use promo code Farzi when you create an account, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase on the Game Time app. That's the Game Time app. Download it to your phone. Get $20 off your first purchase when you use promo code Farzi. How about this? Last-minute ticket deals, flash ticket deals, all right there on the Game Time app. They even got ticket deals for an hour after the event starts. So you might miss the opening act, the middle act, but you'll see the headliner with the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app to your phone. Use promo code Farzi. Get $20 off your first purchase. And if you find tickets in the same section and row for less money on another site, how about this for the Game Time guarantee? You find that, they guarantee the lowest price. They'll get you back at 110% of the difference. Not too shabby. Game Time app. Download the Game Time app for the next game you want to go to. How about the amazing people at MyBookie? MyBookie.ag. Oh, my goodness. You want to get in all the action on MyBookie? Check out MyBookie. You can bet on the world of hockey, basketball, football, baseball, everything at MyBookie. Even the world of politics or television. Oscars last night, you could shell out a few fuzzles right there on MyBookie. Download the MyBookie app to your phone. Use promo code Farzi and get up to $1,000 redeemable cash bonus at MyBookie, mybookie.ag. How about PHL Sports Nation, Philadelphia Sports Nation, enhancing your Philadelphia sports fan experience across all social media and blogs. That's PHLSportsNation.com. Let's get to the chat check and see how you wonderful people are doing on this fine morning. Sean Kilrain, hello. Antonio King, good morning. Hey, good morning. Of all the dumb things we've heard from coaches over the years. The A is saying B-Ball Paul victory tour yesterday. Of all the dumb things, Doc Rivers saying we're not going on the Paul Reed victory tour. Where the hell is the win in that? I don't want to go off on a tangent on this, and I'm not. But essentially arguing for DeAndre Jordan when we all said don't play DeAndre Jordan and play B-Ball Paul playing well, and then getting asked about it. What's the victory in saying that we're not going to go on the Paul Reed victory tour? It still confounds me when, and hey, you brought it up, but that still is just, why would you say that? Why would you put down a young guy who's checking every box? Well, it's not really putting him down. It's just saying, no, it's putting him down. You say, oh yeah, he's played great. He really wants more minutes, and we'll see if we get him some more minutes because he's certainly deserving them. Something encouraging, not something disparaging. Sean Killer and Fletcher Cox talking smack to President Bush about him liking the Cowboys was awesome. Yes. Oh my God, he is one of those guys who just say anything, and I do appreciate that. April, good morning, April. What's going on? Sean Gillespie, what's popping? April, so much leadership gone. The players left are going to need to step it up. How does this happen in a locker room with the transition? When we had Todd Harriman's on last week, he talked about leadership. He talked about guys like Jamal Jackson, the Eagles moving on from him, listening to the leaders on the team and how those guys got to emerge and how every players can sniff it out when it's fake. Like when it's forced, players, it's like, okay, it does a hell of a lot more harm than it does good. Especially if it's, again, forced, where a coach, like for instance, I try to be as careful as I can with my words because I don't want to illustrate the wrong point when it comes to Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts ain't that rah-rah guy. Like if you're a true vocal leader, because there are more ways to lead than getting in somebody's face and yelling and screaming. Vocal leaders are different than follow my lead, do what I do. Don't listen to what I say because I'm not saying anything anyway. But with Jalen Hurts, I'm not expecting him to be that vocal guy. Do I want him to pick his spots? He's going to need to pick his spots. But if Nick Sirianni or Kellen Moore or Howie or Jeffrey Lurie are going up to Jalen and be like, you got to talk every week. You got to say, we need you to say more. We need you to say stuff. You should, right now is the time to say something. And then Jalen Hurts has to get out there. The team's going to look at it and be like, yeah, this ain't it. Like, we think you're a talented player and all, but like, this ain't it, man. That's not your thing. Like, that just falls on deaf ears and ends up doing more harm than good because now you're just listening to a guy talk because he was told to talk. And that really takes the bite out of some things. You know what I mean? So that's not good. A.J. Brown will be that guy to talk more, I'm sure. But when it comes to the defense, Brandon Graham can only say so much. After that, Darius Slay's a captain. He's really going to have to take up more. And I know some people will roll their eyes at that, but the players on this team, they love the guy. They really respect him. Yes, even after I think you pointed it out last week, even after he said something like, oh, well, I played great. The rest of the defense didn't play great during the season. Remember when he said that? Yeah, they love the guy. Two-time captain now. He had never been a captain before the last two seasons. He was really touched emotionally by the fact that the team voted him to be a captain. Now he's going to use that seniority for good. A lot more good, especially without the voice of Fletcher Cox on that team. I don't know where they go from here in terms of that leadership, but there's nowhere to go but up after the way the season ended last year. Last time the Eagles lost players like this was the 92-93 offseason. Was that Reggie? Good God. I'm surprised more veterans didn't retire after the Bucks playoff loss, says Sean Gillespie. It wasn't pretty. I mean, you just heard Jordan Davis say it. That's not the way you want to send off veterans like that. That's not the way you want to send those guys off. Yeah. We've listened to everyone. Covey, Swift, Johnson. We've heard everybody talk about what the hell happened. Covey was the first name. Covey was the first name I mentioned. That's funny. Of like what happened at the end of the year. The more I look back on it, let's just get this out of the way. It shouldn't have happened. Okay. But nobody has the answer. Everyone's got like different answers for was the end of last season avoidable? The only thing I will say was absolutely avoidable was switching out of Sean Desai to Matt Patricia. that was reaching for a dumbbell on the Titanic. That was not it. Speaking of things that weren't it, that wasn't it. That's the only thing that I would have gone back and changed and then expected a different outcome. Because listening to the players talk, a lot of them kind of knew that it would be the end for Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce. Could be the end for Brandon Graham. Could mean the end for the head coach that they supposedly love so much. And they couldn't score. Like they were terrible. They couldn't pick up the blitz. They couldn't tackle. Like everything was horrible. Everything was horrible. There was no saving grace to the way the season ended. There was no like, oh, well, this guy's like, there wasn't like a 3-sack game from Jalen Carter. You know what I mean? There was nothing like that made you go, oh, wow, that seems really, oh, yeah, give me some hope. They give me some hope for next year. Nothing. It was so terrible that it seems like it's almost impossible to repeat how bad it was. But as we know, a 10-1 record that they did have, and 10-3 record they had when they made the change of defensive coordinator, it felt hollow. Like when they were 10-1 the year before, you watched it go, oh yeah, this team, man, they're controlling games. They're a force to be reckoned with. This is incredible. When they were 10-1, 10-3, it's like, they're really lucky to be 10-1, 10-3. Now the test. The gauntlet. Remember all the talk of the gauntlet at the end of the season? How'd they come out of the other end of that gauntlet? Pretty bad. Pretty banged up. But listening to the guys talk about it afterwards, after the dust settles, and the dust is pretty much settled now, really trying to examine it with hindsight. The only thing that I really think could have changed the outcome is not making the decision to go away from Sean Desai to Matt Patricia. That just compounded the problem. It didn't solve any problems. It just compounded the problem. And I still feel like that neutered your head coach. And if your head coach is supposed to be the rah-rah leader guy that you love so much, you just, I've said it many times, I'll say it again, you just neutered him in front of the team. Well, what power do you really have if this wasn't your decision? But if you really knew at the end of the year that if you loved your head coach, that's the way you play for him. If you loved Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox, and that's the way you played that last game, this was a problem far beyond what the Eagles were just putting out there on the field. This was just an organizational-wide problem. Like people, Jalen Hurts haters, for instance. Well, oh, look, how do you lose like that? If you have a quarterback like that, you're not supposed to have a downfall like that. If it's not just Jalen Hurts. Like I know it's much easier for people to just say it's one name, or even Nick Sirianni. It's all Nick Sirianni's fault. Maybe. But I feel like this was a organizational-wide failure at the end of the year. The fact that so many things went into the way the season ended, the downfall of the season, the fact that you knew about these guys most likely stepping away. You have this head coach that was certainly on the hot seat, at least in the fans' eyes at the end of the season. And that's the way you played for Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelce, Nick Sirianni. Makes me think that it was far beyond just one simple fix. But I think if there was one reset button to push, one do-over button to push, it would be firing Desai, stripping of play calling essentially, and putting in Matt Patricia. That'd be the one do-over. If I had one thing to redo, it would be that from last season. But the fact that everything else went wrong as well just makes me think, wow, with all this stuff to play for and they couldn't play better than what we saw, it went beyond emotion. It went beyond leadership. Maybe no amount of leadership could have righted the ship of the way the season ended last year. Pedro. I kind of answered this question. What's going on? As far as you don't want to be that guy, but does Fletcher Cox retiring have an impact on the cap? It has a positive impact on the cap. Again, not in something that you'll see, in terms of, oh, look, this money comes off the cap. No, money won't be allotted. He signed a 1-year deal before last year. So if he signed another 1-year deal, then it probably would have been in double figures. Probably would have been, I would say, about $11 million, unless he was looking to do a farewell tour like Brandon Graham, where you said, I've made my money. You don't got to pay me that much right now. I'll give you the discount. I'll give you the hometown discount. I'll give you the 1-year extension of my career discount. But he's not doing that. And it's fine to be that guy. You can ask that question. It's not a bad question. Sean Gillespie's young players must step up and be more vocal. I'll agree with that. James Alexander, what's going on? Good morning. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis are going to be the future of our defense. I think they have the talent. Now they just got to it's just got to work. If you talk to a lot like college coaches, for instance, and they talk about guys that are going to the next level, that are definitely going to play in the NFL and all that stuff, the number one thing that's always said with every college coach I've ever talked to is always about work ethic. And it's like, you gotta really work. Like, you're not, if you're at Alabama, Georgia, whatever, you're not playing against, the Sisters of the Poor anymore. You're playing in the NFL. So you're always playing against men. I've heard ex-athletes talk about this, retired athletes talk about this when it comes to quarterbacks. Like, let's see how he is when he gets hit by a man. You know what I mean? When that young quarterback gets hit by an NFL player. When that defensive tackle or that nose tackle has got to go up against a man on the offensive side of things. How are they going to handle that? It's going to take work. More work than they've ever had to put in anything. And they're going to go up against guys who have already been doing it for a number of years. And they've put in the work already. Guys like Bryce Huff, for instance, an undrafted player having a 10-sack season. Oh, he's got a chip on his shoulder. That guy's going to work. That guy's already been told. He's far from a first-round pick, folks. But he's got a chip on his shoulder. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, they got to have that. They got to have that same chip on their shoulder. The people say, we hit a wall last year. Well, you did. Can't let that happen again. Okay, yeah. Everyone understands you played a lot of football in the last 2-3 years here. Now it's time to push that aside and make sure you're ready to go. And guess what? I think a lot of that falls on Nick Sirianni as well. I think some of it might fall on analytics and how much you're going to be preparing sports science, how much you're going to be preparing these guys for the season. The fact that the Eagles had a really soft training camp and then went to the Super Bowl. And then this year, by all reports, had a even softer training camp and fell short of even winning a playoff game. So where do you draw the line? Do you now step it up, ramp it up to make sure these guys are in shape for an entire season? Or do you err on the side of fatigue again and say, oh, well, we don't want to burn them out in training camp, and then they'll be done by the time December rolls around? Well, where's the happy medium there? Going to be difficult. Going to be difficult to find that out. Freed monies will go to Devontae Smith. Probably. Wow. How do you know that is in the deep recesses of my mind? The couple's toilet on SNL. Not to brag, but I have interviewed Kevin Nealon, and I did ask him about that. And he said, I'm surprised how many people's minds that has stayed in. The couple's toilet. Yeah, I face south side. My wife faces north side, and we can talk. Before we moved, I had my office, my studio in the basement, and that's where I would watch games and stuff, and we couldn't talk. In a row home in Philly, you're not going to have that luxury. I do miss the row home in Philly. But this is one big benefit of having this house is that it's not all stacked on top of each other. We're right next to each other. Yeah. Look at that. Sean, Reddick needs to stay here. Sweat can go. Okay, this was my question from earlier. Who do you want to stay, Reddick or Sweat? Reddick needs to stay here. Sweat can get traded for some picks. I wouldn't be mad. I'm with you right there. I'm absolutely with you right there. Wilson in Pittsburgh is going to be hilarious. Why is that? Sean Gillespie, Broncos are idiots, but for $1 million, you have nothing to lose. Perfect fit for Pittsburgh. IA, good defensively. Okay. Yeah, and you get a year of what? Training Kenny Pickett under Russell Wilson. I'll say this. I don't really put those two in the same category. Hey, Kenny, here's how you run for your life. What happened to Sports Take? I don't know. My show, Farzi show, is syndicated on, or simulcasted, I should say. Not syndicated. Simulcasted on Jacob. So I don't know. Broncos are idiots, but for $1 million, I already read that. Sorry. What else is here? Leading by example. Teams certainly have to do that. Kevin, what's going on? Fletch was an amazing Eagle, always will be. Certainly. Kevin, perfect way to put it. A.J. Brown is the vocal guy. Jalen is the follow me guy more than anything. Billion% agree. Billion% agree. Lane Johnson will have to be a vocal leader too. I agree. Kevin, that was a dumbbell move. Moving on from Sean Desai. Eagles fan, Cox should have taken Graham with him. Dude is wasting a roster spot. All right, I don't know what the hell is going on with my research computer, if you will. I wanted to get you guys a specific number on Brandon Graham, and I thought I wrote it down before the show, and I did not. And it was the snap count for Brandon Graham this year versus last year, because from everything I've been reading, it just took a nosedive this year. And when I heard him say at the end of the year, I'm going to go for a farewell tour, I went, I don't like that. And hey, look, I love Brandon Graham. The guy can dictate his terms on going out. But the line farewell tour is not something you want to hear. Yeah, holy Stromboli. Okay. 2020. Yeah. Here's the last few years here for Brandon Graham. 2019, 76% of the snaps. 2020, 69% of the snaps. Nice. 2021, he's hurt, only plays in 2 games, 35% of the snaps in those games. 2022 comes back with a vengeance, 43% of the snaps, gets double digits in sacks. And then last year, last year was the first game since his second year in the league where he did not get credited a start. 2022, he's only started 1 game. But last year, 2023, went from 43% of the defensive snaps to 34, a 9% drop. So what are you going to expect now at 36? Huh? Not much. Not much. That's kind of, I'm sure that's also part of the negotiating ploy too. If you're Fletcher Cox, if you're Brandon Graham and you're Brandon Graham's camp, I'm sure that's one of the negotiating. It's like, look, Fletcher's going to be gone. Kelsey's gone. How many leaders do you want to lose? You got some young guys on the defensive line that need some grooming. Brandon Graham's right there for you. What are you doing? You're going to be moving on from Josh Sweat potentially. You're going to be moving on for Hassan Reddick potentially. Brandon Graham? That's probably how that went. Need BG for veteran presence. I concur. There you go. Benny Boom, 68. For God's sake, let's move on from last season's disappointment. We all know what happened. That's the thing we don't. Other than the fact that physically what happened, it's time to look forward towards the future, how it needs to address what the defense needs. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Cox was more productive than Graham. Absolutely. I would have preferred to keep him. I agree. He didn't want to stay. He wants to retire. If you're asking me right now, who would you want to get one more year out of, Brandon Graham or Fletcher Cox? The answer is Fletcher Cox. Now, you might say, oh, well, you have an abundance of talent at defensive tackle. Yeah, I think you do. You have Fletcher Cox, you have Jordan Davis, and you have Jalen Carter, and you have Milton Williams. That's good. But I still want Fletcher. If you're telling me I can have one or the other, I'm keeping Fletcher Cox. There you go. Rakeem, you just exactly couldn't agree more. Fletch didn't want to play. Laugh out loud. Kevin Nealon is fantastic. You know, Kevin Nealon was a college quarterback. I'm pretty sure it was at Fordham. I could be totally wrong on that, but he was a college quarterback. We had a lot of fun. You know what? We had a Chuck lets me couples toilet scared to look this up. Oh no, look it up. It's fun. If I were, oh man, I think Phil Hartman did the voiceover. And by the way, I'd watched Shane Gillis host Saturday Night Live, and then I watched Sydney Sweeney host Saturday Night Live. And I don't really watch Saturday Night Live anymore, but it's just, man. You know, Tosh.0, Daniel Tosh had a comment about Saturday Night Live, and I heard it, and it was one of those things that I heard, and I didn't want it to be true. And the more I've thought about it, I was like, wait, was it true? Is it true? And what he said was, everyone loves Saturday Night, and Lorne Michaels has said this as well, but everyone loves Saturday Night Live between the ages of like 8th grade through high school. That's usually when people say, oh, that was the best cast. Like that's their favorite, those favorite years. And for me, that would have been like Mike Myers, Chris Farley, Adam Sandler, David Spade, the beginning of Will Ferrell, Dana Carvey, of course. And that to me is like my favorite cast. The Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman years, Farley, Sandler, Mike Myers, Tim Meadows. Tim Meadows was there for a while. That would have been like, I look back on it, and what Tosh said was, it wasn't funny. You were just excited to stay up. And I was like, damn, I don't want that to be true. But is it true? But then I'm like, hold on. Mike Myers withstood the test of time. Will Ferrell certainly has withstood the test. David Spade's still around. Dana Carvey's still around. Phil Hartman, God rest his soul. Wish he was still around, but he was amazing. I still watch his stuff and laugh my ass off. Kevin Nealon, hilarious. And but I was watching Saturday Night Live now, and I was like, this is not funny. This is not funny. Shane Gillis, I thought was funny. Sydney Sweeney had some funny stuff. I felt like her monologue was a little, you could tell she was really nervous. But yeah, I was watching it, and I was just like, I like that couple's toilet. Scared to look this up. I still have the comment up on the screen. That's pretty funny. Those guys, anyway, I was like, no, those guys from my generation have remained funny and entertaining. I watch this nowadays, and I'm like, they need a host. Like, to watch the show and stomach the show, they need a host. Weekend Update, I think, kills it still. I think that's still a great. Colin Jost and Michael Che, I think they still do a great job. The guest hits they have with the updates, those guys are usually great. Those guys are usually killers. But yeah. No, I think my generation was the best. I know people will go back to like John Belushi and Eddie Murphy, and those, they're great, hilarious. Still laugh my ass off at those, but like my guys. Benny, to be honest, do you think Cam is ready to replace Kelsey at center? Yes, I do. But I'm not he's not ready to be a Hall of Famer. Like, there's going to be a drop-off. I feel there is going to be a drop-off in center. I don't feel like that is a piping hot take. You are taking over from currently an all-pro. It's not like Jason Kelsey was an all-pro 2 years ago, and it's like, wow, it's really sad to watch Jason Kelsey still play, you know? No, he's hanging it up on top, okay? Cam Jurgens is coming into that. There will be a learning curve. Picking up blitzes. We know how the Eagles struggled at that already at the end of last season, especially. Can Cam Jurgens help squash that problem? Will Jalen Hurts have the trust in Cam Jurgens to make the right read, shift protection. Will Jalen Hurts try to take more of a role on of doing that? Calling out the protections more. Trying to overrule Cam Jurgens. Quarterback has final say on that. That's from the mouth of Jason Kelce himself. My bigger problem is, can Tyler Steen play up to the level of Cam Jurgens at right guard? That's my bigger question. Babs. Oh, Babs, you're too kind. Thank you. Kevin, Reddick should stay if he isn't dropped in coverage all the time. I agree. Don't want to keep a guy in my locker room that's disgruntled about money. Take the best offer and let Reddick go. Well, yeah, look, he could certainly be disgruntled about the money, but we'll see what kind of deal he gets. You're okay. So your generation is 89 to 95 ish with Saturday Night Live. Is it bought 316? How do I say your name? 3-aught. How do I say your name? Can you write it phonetically? I want to say your name right because you've been commenting a lot and I appreciate it. And I just want to make sure I got your name right. Oh, great shout out to Robert Smigel. Oh my God, Robert Smigel. For those that don't know Robert Smigel, you might know Triumph the Insult Comic Dog. That's Robert Smigel. Hilarious. Saturday TV Funhouse. Cam will be fine at center. Just won't be Kelce. Mike, that's a great way to put it. Mike Fittery. Great way to put it. There's going to be a growing period for sure, says April. I agree. KJ, that's for Cam Jurgens. KJ says Reddick a professional. There you go. Just like Jim Harbaugh. Ball 316. I'll go with that. You're predicting Steen will be at right guard. I am predicting Steen will be at right guard. Yes. I am predicting Steen will be at right guard. Yes. The ambiguously gay duo is hilarious. They were hilarious. Thank you very much. Look that one up, folks. That's a good one. Ross and Found. Morning. Dropped my daughter off at Northeast High School after a week off. Well, that's nice. A little spring break. Is it spring break? It's not even spring yet. But yeah, that's great. Oh, couple of things. I got to get this in too. Rob at Temple. Thanks for reminding me. Good morning. Can't wait till 12. Okay. Hope won't escape the pocket. Okay. Jeez, gotcha. KJ, no. Saquon is not a real thing. That was Friday's show. I'll just repeat it for those that didn't see it. Oh, Jesus, that. Sorry, Ross and Found. Jesus, Mary and Joseph. Sorry about that. Is Saquon a real thing? No. Saquon's not a real thing. Saquon, the Eagles want people to believe that they're interested in Saquon Barkley because it's going to drive up the price for the Cowboys, and it would drive up any price the Giants would have for bringing him back. So that's not a real thing. Temple. Oh man. So I didn't post anything about this. Maybe you guys didn't see, but Friday night, they asked me to go on. So you guys know I do a lot of stuff with Fox 29. I'll be on the morning show with Eitan and the Mike Jarek, of course, and Alex Holly. Those guys are awesome. They'll have us on for the Balds segment, footballed and all that stuff. For the people on the podcast, I'm bald. Anyway, so they had me on the Fantastic Sports Show. They had Eitan and I come on Friday night for the Fantastic Sports Show. I'd never done the Fantastic Sports Show before. So I'm like, oh, this will be fun. This will be exciting. So I get they send you like a list of like, hey, these are things we might get into. And like number one on the list is the Temple betting scandal. And I was like, oh, damn it. As a Temple guy, I am a Temple alum. I don't want to skirt this topic. Something people are talking about. The thing that bothers me is that they've been monitored, quote, for a while about potentially point shaving, gambling allegations surrounding Temple men's basketball. It's certainly something I hope is not true. I hate to be rooting for this, but I just hope that my team's really bad. And that's it. That's just they're bad. But there was a point swing from a 1.5 spread to like an 8.5 spread, and that doesn't happen in the same day. Jeez. With nobody. Oh, by the way, the whole team's hurt. Oh, I can see why the line would change. No. The rebounding differential, like 49-21, is atrocious. And again, the term they've been monitored for a while is really bad. Really bad. So there you go. Hope it's not true. I just really hope my team's just bad. That's what I've caught myself saying over the last 48 hours. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening. You guys are wonderful as per usual. Look forward to getting in a little bit more into free agency tomorrow on tomorrow's program, as well as the NFL draft, and seeing what direction the Eagles could go in that regard. Also, get a little bit more into what we can expect from the 1098 76ers over the next handful of games, and hopefully get some more information as to Joel Embiid's workload. It's been 2 weeks since we last got a report on what's going down with Joel Embiid, and whether or not he can come back this year and play before the playoffs or play in the playoffs at all. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. My name is Mark Farzetta. This is The Farzy Show, presented by MyBookie, mybookie.ag. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. Be back with you guys tomorrow for another fine edition of The Farzy Show. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.